genética e o ambiente influenciam no comportamento? E qual a relação entre linguagem e natureza humana? São estas questões que o psicólogo Steven Pinker discute na segunda parte do especial Fronteiras do Pensamento.
Let me switch now to a third question, which is how should we understand nature and nurture? And I think any scientist studying genes and culture, biology, and the environment would agree that nature and nurture are not alternatives. There is never an answer to the question, is it innate or is it learned? Is it due to genes or is it due to culture? That they always interact. All explanations of behavior require both. So when the English philosopher John Locke, who popularized the term tabula rasa, which was the translation of the title of my book in Portuguese, Locke said there is nothing in the intellect that was not first in the senses. And Leibniz answered him by saying, well, except for the intellect itself. And that, I think, captures the reason why both nature and nurture are necessary. Language, the thing that I study, is a perfect example. Obviously, no child is born knowing the language of his community. Children don't come out of the womb speaking Portuguese or Japanese or Yiddish or English or Swahili or any particular language. You have to learn the words, you have to learn the particular rules. Nonetheless, you have to have a human brain which presumably is predisposed or wired to learn language to be able to go from the sentences your parents say to your own ability to produce and understand brand new sentences. That's why if you have a baby exposed to Portuguese and a cat exposed to Portuguese, the baby will learn it, the cat won't. And so it's not just the environment either. In my book, Tabula Rasa, I presented a number of bodies of evidence against the idea that the mind is a blank slate or tabula rasa. I'll just give you two of those pieces of evidence. One of them is the presence of human universals. Now, we know that cultures vary, sometimes radically, from one to another, but it's easy to lose sight of the ways in which all human societies have things in common. The anthropologist Donald Brown put together a book by going through the anthropological literature, tabulating all of the kinds of behavior or thought or emotion that have been documented in all the world's cultures. And he came up with a list of more than 300, everything from ambivalence and age distinctions and affection in the A's, all the way down to a word for the color white, attempts to control the weather, and a worldview at the other end of the alphabet. Another completely different source of evidence that the mind is not a blank slate comes from the heritability of brain structure and behavior. One can use experiments of nature to try to tease apart the contributions of genes and environment. For example, if you look at identical twins reared together in the same home, identical twins, or monozygotic twins, share all of their genes and almost all of their environment. Fraternal twins, or dizygotic twins, though, share only half their genes and also share most of their environment. And then, in rare cases, you have identical twins who were separated at birth, given up for adoption to different homes, sometimes in different countries. They share all of their genes, but they don't share their environment. And these are different comparisons allow you to try to separate the effects of genes in the environment. So brain structure itself is, to a large extent, under the control of the genes. Well, does this make any difference in behavior? To understand that, you have to look at the personality and cognitive traits of twins. And there's a famous cartoon that I think sums up a lot of this research. The caption of the cartoon is, "Separated at birth, the Malafert twins meet accidentally. And it shows two identical-looking, kind of nerdy guys with identical contraptions in their lap in the waiting room of a patent attorney. And the humor in the cartoon is they've never met each other. By sheer coincidence, they both end up at the same time on the same day with the same invention. Now, this is an exaggeration. Identical twins who are separated at birth are not that similar, but they are very, very, very similar. Their scores are correlated in IQ tests, in tests of personality, in real-world behavior, like probability of getting divorced, number of cigarettes smoked, how much television they watch, probability of getting in trouble with the law, even sometimes idiosyncratic quirks, like one set of twins who were separated at birth, given up for adoption. One of them grew up in a Jewish family in Trinidad. The other grew up in a Nazi family in Germany. But when they entered the lab in their 40s, they were both wearing identical shirts. Both of them had rubber bands around their wrist. And both of them liked to pretend to sneeze in elevators to watch everyone jump. And these similarities have led psychologists to propose the first law of behavioral genetics, which is all behavioral traits are at least partly heritable. But not all, and anyone who knows identical twins know that they are similar, but they're not identical. So the next question is, both genes and environment are important. Where do the environmental influences come from? And almost everyone would give the following answer. It comes from your parents, the way your parents treated you. But when you look at the effect of parenting with proper genetically controlled studies, the results are very surprising. First of all, most scientific studies of the effects of parenting are actually useless because they don't control for heritability. So let me give you an example. A study finds that if parents spank their children, the children grow up to be more violent. Therefore, spanking causes violent children. Well, not exactly. Maybe a tendency to violence is partly genetic, and the same kind of parents who are violent in the way they treat their children have children who are violent in the way they deal with other people. Another example, parents who talk to their children a lot have children who do better in tests of verbal intelligence. Does this mean that everyone should talk to their children a lot in order to improve their intelligence? Well, maybe, but maybe not, because the study might just mean that that genes for being articulate make parents talk a lot, the same genes are in their children, the children talk a lot. The correlation doesn't prove causation. If you do the studies properly, that is with twins or adopted children, then these are generally the results. First of all, siblings separated at birth end up as similar as siblings reared together. Now this is very surprising. So remember the Malafert twins in the cartoon. They separated at birth, grew up in different homes. Now imagine what would happen if the Malafert twins were reared together. You might say, well, now they should be even more similar because not only do they share their genes, they also share their parents and their older sisters and younger sisters and so on. But the facts are that in most studies, there is no difference.